This is the Bailed Out Podcast,
You have rights. Nobody knows how to deal with the bureaucracy.
where we talk bail to keep you out of jail.
The only thing that saved me each time is I wasn't drunk.
Does that mean you're a really bad driver then?
Hosted by Sean Plotkin, a multi-generational bail agent and 5-star author. And John Roraba, a non-profit founder and attorney who has helped over 20,000 families.
We're not far right, we're not far left, we're very neutral, I hope.
Bail is the balance.
John, what is justice?
That is what the court system is there to establish.
Bailed Out is brought to you in part by searchandmate.com, Turning Leaf, and Angels Bail Bonds. Now, please welcome your hosts, Sean and John.
Hi, welcome today. My name is Sean Plotkin. I'm the author of Get Bail, Leave Jail. It's a book intended to help the clients to better navigate the bail system. I've written the book because I'm a multi-generational family-owned business owner called Angels Bail Bonds. And during the scope of that time, we've bailed out tens of thousands of clients and their corresponding families. Today, my co-host is with me, the most amazing co-host and expert in bail law.
Thank you, Sean.
Yes.
I'm John Roraba. It's so nice to be with you here today. I'm an attorney. I've worked in bail since before I was an attorney in 1993 when I was still in law school. Had the fortune of going to law school with a bail agent, and he hooked me up with the legendary bail attorneys Mark Bernstein and Alan Nunez. And I've really focused on that my entire career. I've done maybe 20,000 motions in that time period, reviewed hundreds of thousands of files. We've been part of 160 or so published opinions. I keep trying to count, and it loses track. It's actually hard to count that. Somewhere around $200 million of savings of forfeitures for families of California. And now I've started a nonprofit, Turning Leaf, which we are getting started to help support the families of those who have loved ones that have been arrested and have been released to them in their custody. And today I'd like to talk, some more about what is bail and how bail works and what that process is. And,
Yes, we got together,
Yeah.
and this is our podcast, Bailed Out,
Yeah.
with John Rohrbaugh, Sean Plotkin, and we were discussing some of the misconceptions, some of the misconstrued news about bail, and thought, since we are experts in bail and bail law, for that matter, that we should get together and help address a lot of this misunderstandings with the average person who has different ideas and opinions affiliated with what bail is, for good and for bad.
So, Sean, what is bail?
So I would go to say that bail, I mean, we all know that when somebody is arrested, that they want to get bailed out. But what it entails, and I'm assuming that's what you were asking, is you get arrested, charged with a crime, you're in jail, and then you've got to figure out how to get out of jail.
Right. And so when somebody's arrested on certain crimes, there's something called the bail schedule, where an amount of bail will be set based on the arrest. Is that right for what that is?
Assuming that the jail wants to adhere to it, or if they would like to go and cite people out for their own recognizance, or speak to the detectives to see if there's more merits in the case, whether to raise the bail amount, lower the bail amount. The bail amount can change once the person's in custody.
Absolutely, absolutely, and a lot of that is in the discretion of the arresting officer for what they think the crime was committed. That's one of the things with bail is you have to set the amount, sometimes just hours or moments, sometimes even after the crime was allegedly committed.
And to that point, one tip to the general public is if you're on a phone in a jail, you probably don't talk about characteristics of the case because they are listened to. And in some instances, we've had clients that have said things that they probably should have followed the Fifth Amendment. And you're the attorney if you want to explain that.
Yeah.
And they incriminated themselves. So the bail got revoked. The bail got raised. It's Be careful.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. But in the general sense, people will have an amount of bail that they have to post to be able to get out quickly from the jail based on the charges that the officer booked them on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely accurate. And I mean, you deal with bail law more frequently, so maybe you can elaborate some of the metrics that are used in some of the systems to be setting the bail schedule. Of course, each magistrate is going to be different, or each jurisdiction has different bail schedules. But for the most part, there is a uniformity which is established by. Yeah.
Well, by the bail schedule,
Yes.
but just what for certain charges, what kind of bail is generally set by the bail schedules in your experience for certain kinds?
Common charges are domestic violence,
Sure,
certain warrants,
sure,
traffic violations are not commonly bailable unless they're a DUI or a DUI with great bodily injury, or a hit and run. Drug charges, drug paraphernalia.
sure. But if someone has a domestic violence, arrest, what's typically the amount of bail that they have to post?
Well, it can go anywhere from 10, 20, 50,000.
Okay,
The it, It depends on the context of the arrest and the information utilized in it. There are domestic battery charges, and there are domestic violence full-on charges, which are considered one of the seven violent felonies in LA County. And domestic violence charges, I don't know if you know, were raised after the response from the acquittal of O.J. Simpson.
certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly, and um, uh, uh, um, uh, other kinds of charges, are they usually in that $10,000 to $50,000 range?
Yeah, I mean, if you do low-level drug charges, they can be anywhere 10,000 or so. If you're drug transporting, 30,000. If you have, but to your point of questioning, we're in a whole new dynamic of a world. Like
Right.
a lot of the bail amounts that were established by the bail schedule, which are supposed to be part of our laws, are out the window with COVID and with
Yeah.
some of the regime by current DAs such as Gascon.
Certainly,
Yeah,
but just as the general system, when you're in jail and there's a bail that's been set, there it's going to be in the generally tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars set as the security. Is that your experience?
well, I mean, there are. To answer your question more directly, I would say the median amount of bail across the board is 27,000.
Okay,
But there is no bail amount for
of course.
27,000. But if you average everything in with the larger bail amounts and the lesser bail amounts, the average median amount is 27,000. At least it is for us. Other agencies may have different criteria or don't do certain bonds, so it may fluctuate. But
Certainly,
yeah,
but if the court sets a bail at the $27,000,
yeah,
let's say, and basically what that requires is the court wants you to deposit $27,000 with the court, and that they'll take if the defendant doesn't show up. And you could just post that money. I remember reading not long ago that the average family can't afford an extra bill of $400. It would cause stress. How are families coming up with $27,000 on the regular to post as security for getting out of jail?
right. So, I mean, you represent many insurance surety companies. I underwrite for many bail surety companies, and
Right.
I have a contract with them with a guarantee to repay them if there's any losses or if somebody doesn't appear in court. Conversely, I pass on this underwriting ability to our clients so that they don't have to deposit $27,000, but they negotiate a premium with me, which is a one-time fee for their release. And if they're not able to make the payment in full, then we work out some kind of a payment plan or alternative repayment method.
Okay, so they don't have to
Yeah.
put the full 27,000 with the court. They can buy a premium from an insurance company, and the insurance company will give the court a contract promising they'll pay the 27,000 if the defendant fails to
Well,
appear.
they would come to us,
Yes.
and we would be basically an insurance agent that would bind the insurance policy, post the bond, and guarantee the appearance in court as required by the court for the defendant.
Right.
Yeah.
And if the defendant fails to appear in court for their criminal case when they're lawfully required, then what happens?
Well, it's at that point that we would be required to convince them to go back to jail or go back to court, sorry, or if they're fleeing or hiding, then at some point we would have to work to apprehend them to bring them back to court.
I kind of skipped ahead. It was where I was
Yeah.
wanting to go here, so I'm going to try and dial it
Yeah.
back to that process. Those first calls that you get when somebody's found out that their family member's in jail and they have this huge tens of thousands of dollars of security that they have to acquire
Right.
somehow. What are those calls like that you receive?
Well, I'll tell you, it's not easy to not know who is on the other line if you're a bereft mother in the middle of the night finding out that your child for the first time is in jail, or the second time, or the third time. I mean, we've had mothers and fathers with their loved ones that have been in custody multiple times, and every time it's it's a little bit heart rattling. And so
Yeah,
sitting there with them, first building the relationship and the rapport, because they don't know who we are. They
right,
don't. They just, oh, I have this need. I'm going to go on the yellow pages, or I'm going to go on the internet, or I saw this cool TV ad, and I'm going to contact this person. Where a lot of times the client has a preconceived notion that it's some gruff um, type of person as illustrated in the movies and the such.
yeah,
So first, it's breaking down the barriers of uh, um, uh, a little bit of concern with uneasiness of not knowing who we are or what we're
right.
about, and then it's opening them up to be listening to them, ask questions, and help give them the comfort to know that things will be okay. Um, it's it's hard because sometimes loved ones are so stressed out in the minutes after their loved ones in jail, and they don't
Yeah,
realize the process. Depending on where they're in custody, they could be there for hours, they could be there for days. If they're put in a county jail, I mean, it could even take us multiple days, even after the bond is posted, to get them out. I don't know if you
right.
know this, but the LA County Jail is the largest jail in the world.
Wow.
So when you got the most people in the world going in, and it's a system. So with that, I mean, you've got to sit, listen, ask questions, and try and peel back the onion so that you not only build rapport, but you understand the problem, and you understand the family, and you understand the relationship of the family, and how it's all intertwined. And some things that may be said may not be deemed to have financial value, but they do have value to me as a bail agent to think, you know what, this is a person that maybe doesn't have all the money or doesn't have the means to pay me back in full, but this is a proud family that will satisfy their contract and make sure that they do what they say they're going to do.
So if they don't do what they say they're going to do,
Yeah,
the defendant runs, goes to another place, doesn't go to court, and that money becomes due through a process, that I deal with.
right.
What is your relationship to that money
Yeah. Well,
as the bail
I
agent?
would start to preface that the majority of people that are in custody and their families are good people, and
Sure.
they 97 plus percent of the time do the right thing. So in this circumstance that you're referring to,
Right.
which is a pretty big
Rare.
outlier,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't think that a bail agent would say, "Oh, well, trust people," but it starts with trust, and it starts with respect, and it starts with the relationship and trying to understand that. So in the context that the few people that are scared or confused or worried about what may happen flee,
Right.
then that obligation would fall on us, where we need to either bring the defendant back into custody, and we have a certain amount of time. In the state of California, it's 6 months. Um, at which point, if we're showing that we are in good faith, working towards trying to bring the defendant back, then we would go to you, and
Yeah.
you would,
Well,
yeah,
you can get an extension at that
right,
point. But my point I'm trying to make with this is the reason that this conversation is so important to you when they call initially from jail is if they don't show up, you have to pay the forfeiture amount. The bail agents are fully liable agents. They're unlike most insurance companies where the insurance company is paying a loss. Surety is not bail, and bail is not written with the expectation of a loss. We're expecting everyone's going to go to court. It's not like car insurance where, everyone's going to get crashes once in a while and you're getting coverage for that, right? So you have a personal responsibility to pay the penalty or to collect it from the family when you have signed a bail bond to let someone out of custody.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, in the world, everybody wants to have skin in the game, and bail agents by default have been underwriting and doing bail for so long that they have built up such a strong skin in the game that they're willing to take more risk than a typical surety or an insurance company would. I mean, my father's been in bail since 1973. My mother's in bail now. She's 62 with her dog Chewy. My stepmother, my brother, my sister. We are a family of bail agents. So it's becoming an innate, ingrained way of thinking where, yes, there is some risk of fronting the money to guarantee the appearance in court. But I don't really see it as that. I see it more as a relational function to be a fabric in the community, not unlike firefighters or police officers or medical personnel who put themselves on the line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are bail agents, and right, bail is innately in the Constitution. It's in the Bill of Rights. It's the
Yeah.
Eighth Amendment. So we are not only
And the California
and
Constitution too.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
well, thank you for letting me speak. How do I get you to speak more? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, well, we're just going through the process because
Right.
I think people don't understand what a bail agent does and how they do it and why you're liable. And there's been so much misinformation that's been thrown around, for so long.
Yeah, I think to help you with explaining more about the bail process, there's something that happens a lot where defendants don't go to court, and it's not through any fault of their own. We get calls maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 times a week where it's like, hey, I didn't go to court and what's going to happen now? Am I going to jail? And it's like, well, there's a process where the court needs to set a warrant for arrest. And as the bail agent, if you show like, hey, I tried in good faith, or I caught COVID, or I did something else, we can do something called a reassumption, where I can reassume the liability with the court, guaranteeing that you will make your appearance in court. And
Right.
so some clients get scared, and I would be
Right.
scared too. But that's a good thing because that means that they're serious about going to court.
Exactly.
So if you communicate, communication is key, trust is key, respect is key.
Well, what I see you doing is converting social capital into financial capital, right? And you're evaluating the social capital. And bail agents take a long time to learn that. Something I've always been admired bail agents is they're able to make these decisions about whether or not somebody's trustworthy at 1:30 at night when they've just woken up and everything the person has told them was a lie.
And it's not even just whether the person, which I assume you're referring to would be the indemnitor in a bail bond, is the loved one that's guaranteeing the appearance in court, because most often the defendant can't be in front of us. I mean, we're allowed
Right.
to go into certain jails to interview the defendant, but with COVID, that's more restrained. And in those situations, we have interviewed the defendant and we have had them sign the paperwork, and we have bailed them out on good faith that they would pay us back after they're released. But you're not even getting to deal with the defendant. Usually, you're dealing with either their loved one
Yeah.
or a girlfriend
Right.
or a cousin or
Right.
a friend or even somebody that's not even in the state or in the country. And you've got to make a decision based off of the communication that they've said, the variables that they've told you, the inflections in their voice, the manner in which they spoke, corresponding what they tell you in the application to compare it amongst our proprietary alternative resources to make sure that it's accurate.
Yeah.
And
if
it's
you're
all
wrong,
at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 a.m.
right. And if you're
Yeah.
wrong, you pay the tens of thousands yourself.
Yes.
Right. So it takes a long time to really tune someone's instincts for that. And what I've really found, that's the real valuable part of bail agents the most is that a few minutes with a bail agent and an indemnitor, and they know whether or not this is somebody who's going to show up in court. And they've tried to capture that with the algorithms that they've still
Well,
use in
I
pretrial.
agree, and I want to get to your
Yeah,
algorithms. I don't fully agree. Like, and this is where with my staff we get into arguments a lot, and I'm trying to learn from them, and of course I'm trying to pass on what I've learned from my family and
right.
with it. But just because an indemnitor isn't saying the right thing, maybe they're not the right indemnitor. So it's
That's
like,
a
you
good
know
point.
what? Thank you for your point. Unfortunately, I'm going to need you to bring someone else that you think would
Right,
be a credible member of the community, and I would like to work with them. Do you have a mom or a dad, an aunt, an uncle, a landlord, a
right.
pastor, anybody that is a stable member of the community? And it's a lot of times the client that's on the phone doesn't know that we're trying. I mean, we're ultimately trying to help them, and they're not realizing that if you think outside the box, anytime it can get done. We just have to find the way to help to get it done. So we're here almost as like a psychiatrist or shrink to help them through the pain, but
Certainly.
also as a coach to help them to figure out how to help them to solve their problem. Now, going back to your point about the AI,
Right, the
yeah,
algorithms that they've tried to capture that bondsman's judgment in algorithms that for the government pretrial services, and I think they've been a total disaster.
yeah, the algorithm that I think you're most commonly referring to is the Arnold tool, and it was invented by a former Enron executive, and a lot of the inputs for the algorithm they've found to be innately biased, and it's a shame. Where you want to look at, of course, previous convictions, but each circumstance is unique. So if you're like, has this person been arrested for this charge? If so, then this action is going to happen, and now they're more culpable for a recidivism rate based off of this information or this geographic region that this person lives in. It's profiling people rather than sitting and having an honest conversation to hone out the facts to figure out the way to thrive.
Exactly. It's just creating boxes and seeing whether they fit in the boxes as opposed to finding out about what their social relationships are and making the right connections, right? It's a
Yes.
very different process between bail and the government pretrial when they use the algorithms. You mentioned earlier with COVID and bail, there was a lot of changes with bail in the last few years that have pretty much washed out now. But a couple of years ago, the state passed a bill, SB 10, that essentially eliminated commercial bail in almost every circumstance and switched it over to having the algorithms. Fortunately, soon after that bill was passed, a lot of news came out about the inability of these algorithms to function in a fair and a useful way, and it really we were able to get a referendum and have that overturned.
So a referendum is a finding by the people that an action was not what the people wanted. So bail
Yeah.
reform passed, and then the people of the state of California voted and removed it.
Exactly, exactly. That's one of the great things about California's government is, if the people are higher than the governor or the state, and when the state passes a law, the people have a right to overturn that law with a referendum, and they got together by a very wide margin. People overturned the SB 10. I think not only because of the lack of trust of the algorithms, but people instinctively understand bail. They understand that when there's a crisis, you need to have a period of time to be able to figure out what that crisis was. If you're going to have a criminal justice process, you have to have time to be able to do that, to get the witnesses, and just holding people in custody during that time causes so many problems for the innocent. That's essentially what I think SB 10 would have turned into
Yeah.
is a detention program, because the algorithms and the steps they had were very complicated, and almost everybody in the criminal justice system would have been held without bail, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, I don't disagree, but even now we're facing adverse effects from it with certain charges being released on their own recognizance. And what that happens
Right.
if, take for example, if you're, and this is for a traffic offense, but most people get tickets. I know I've had quite a few in the past. If you get pulled over and the police officer asks you for your license and registration, and they go, ask you a question, and of course you're like, well, I'm not sure, officer, and you play coy, and they give you your ticket. You sign at the bottom of that ticket that you're going to guarantee that you're going to go to court.
Yes.
Well, a lot of times with the new enactments to try and perpetuate the actions for bail reform, we're having a lot of inmates that are being cited out or released on their own recognizance. That abstractly seems like a social good because the jails are less impacted. People are able to go out and be with their families and be with jobs. However, the social fabric that a bail bonds person has with the defendant isn't there.
Right.
And now we're seeing an increase in crime across the state and across the nation.
Right. You've talked about that skin in the game, right? When
Yeah.
you've got government pretrial or OR release, either one, the difference being with government pretrial, they generally will have the probation department having things like ankle monitors or other, survey, right?
Yeah, and to that point, if you're wearing an ankle monitor, you're already being confined. You're not a free individual. And I would say that you're some ways serving a sentence before you're even found guilty, and
Right.
that's against what our inalienable rights in the Constitution are. We're
Yeah.
innocent until proven guilty, but now I have to carry around an ankle monitor and have my left foot out of the shower so that this thing doesn't get wet. And then if I end up messing with it because it's itchy, I'm gonna have somebody speak like, "Hey, what are you doing? Don't touch that thing." And it's like, man, give me a break. I said I'm going to go to court. So yeah,
I
yeah.
agree, but I do think there's a very different effect whenever there are some of the ankle monitors or other rings or phones or other
Right.
things the bail agents use as opposed to the government, because bail agents are using that social connection to be and it's being paid for by the family, and you might have somebody that you need to know where they're at, but it's very different than when the government has all that information, the Fifth Amendment and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point with an ankle monitor, if anybody really wanted to force to get free, they could. So if it's going to be used for, I mean, we don't personally use ankle monitors in
Right.
bail because it's like either we're in it or we're not. And then if you're going to have a monthly fee to it, and then you're going to
Right.
imbibe somebody, like instead of putting the load onto a family of $300 to $500 a month, I think that's what it was. I
Right.
think that's what it was 10 or 15 years ago. It's more about, hey, who do you know that's going to vouch for you?
Right.
What friend do you know? And it's more about better underwriting rather than putting an additional load on somebody on the emotional pain of knowing,
Right.
hey, I'm carrying a ball and chain around for my daily activities. What if I want to go swim with my kid? Now I can't. What if I want to go sit in the jacuzzi from a hard day's
Right.
work? Now I can't. I mean,
Right.
forget that. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That is very frustrating. And there's so many false positives. What I've seen on those is you get these reports, and every time it's out of battery, it's a little thing is wrong, and and it just causes a great deal of frustration. I'm not a fan of those either.
No.
The ones on the phones I like better
That's
because they're just
easier.
connecting, as it goes through, and it's a part of that. But again, it's just a very different dynamic when the government does certain things versus your family or socially significant people doing things. And bail agents working through those social structures are able to keep things more calm in a crisis circumstance. When you're constantly being irritated by
Yeah.
ankle monitor, all sorts of things, when you're under government pretrial. Now you don't have allies to get the person to go to court, right? You have allies to keep him away from court, right? Because he's complaining, and all his friends and the family and those who he's around, they're going to hear his complaints,
Yeah.
right? And it just makes it builds up a level of frustration to going back to court, and we've seen that.
Or
seen
feeling
that,
ridicule or shame.
right?
I mean, I've been arrested more times than I want to admit, and people are human, and it's
Right.
I mean, of course, people that are found guilty, they'll serve their time, but let them be free once they do that. So
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
It makes so much more sense, and it is so much better for our society as a whole whenever people are in a social shell in a crisis, and that's really why I started Turning Leaf. I realized that nobody was giving those family help. The bail agents were trying, but the rates that California had set, it's really hard to give a family help while you're taking thousands of dollars that they can't afford from them, right?
Yeah, it's also disingenuous where, I mean, I don't want to knock on things, but where a bail agency is going to say, well, we can get you out for 1%. And often people have false hope and it's a lost leader. That's going to be a rarity. And that's very extreme situations where,
Right.
so
Right.
I don't want to just say that bail is great. There are certain elements that I think should be improved, not to mislead some people, not to upsell some people. And I think your nonprofit Turning Leaf may be a better way to help increase the social fabric, increase the happiness factor, mitigate some of the pain, and
And
expound more on it, please. Yeah.
and bail agents are still taking the risk there, right? You
Yes.
know, they still are the ones who are going to have to pay, and they're still making the decision: do I really want him out? But the family can get support.
Yes.
And there's so many nonprofit and governmental entities that want to support families in crisis, but don't get access. So bail really gives those nonprofits and the county the opportunity, and bringing people to those entities to help them is what I really want to get more focused on. I'm still building. I need to get my membership classes going, and we're working on that, but we're close.
Well, I'm
And
with you. As I said earlier, since we're my father formerly had the Plotkin School of Bail Education. In
Sure.
continuing bail education, I'd be happy to be one of your first clients where we can be educating bail
Absolutely.
agents on to the benefits of your nonprofit, and helping to reframe the thinking of current bail agents that are like, I think John's way is a good way. So if you can explain a little bit more about it, I think
Certainly,
yeah.
certainly. So when in the crisis where someone is calling for bail, it is hard on everyone. Everyone is under pressure when one of their family members is being arrested, right? So it once somebody has been bailed out and you've approved them, at that point in the process, I am going to have our what I'm calling a fiducial now to
Yeah.
contact the both the family and work with the family to say, what does the defendant need?
Mhm.
You know, what do they need? We've already started working with a number of rehabilitation, alcohol and drug rehabilitation units, and we'll get more of those services as we grow. But the counties have a lot of housing services. There's a lot of money that is available to people when they're in crisis, but nobody knows how to deal with the bureaucracy to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have that service navigator. So
Hey,
essentially,
I would say more simply even, and I had read somewhere, and you probably know better, that approximately 40% of inmates that are released from custody end up becoming homeless.
I've heard that. Yeah.
So, I mean, if your nonprofit is helping to restabilize members of the community that have felt like they're black sheep, or they're not able to get a hand up,
Right.
I mean, it's great. It's a great framework and it prevents recidivism, which is the likelihood that somebody will become a repeat offender. It's higher for somebody who's had a first offense.
For
What
sure.
is this recidivism rate? You think
It-
30
it's
something
high.
percent? Yeah.
What I've seen is that really the people who have been through the system and gotten out the other side usually are the best people to advise those who are still beating their head against the system, because at a certain point it makes no sense. You know, just get your life stabilized, stop drinking, or the other dynamics you have to, and things get better very quickly. Most criminal problems occur with men between 15 and 25. It's almost all developmental issues. And so when you get somebody who's gone through that circumstance and you can connect them at the point, or to help the family even, because, even getting defendants to listen to you sometimes can be difficult. So rather than really focusing on the defendants, which a lot of others have, that's why I think bail already focuses on the defendant's social structure.
Isn't that an unfortunate thing? I mean, that statistic that you threw out, 15 to 25, that's before
Yeah.
even a grown adult's prefrontal lobe is fully mature.
Right.
And this is a large period of a hormonal change.
Yeah.
And I was watching a YouTube video about a smart a doctor, a psychiatrist that looks at behavioral therapy from Harvard. I
Right.
think his name's Sobolski or something, and he was saying that people have, I forget how, a tumor, let's say somewhere in
right.
their brain,
Sure.
causes them to go out and commit
Sure.
crimes.
You remember Gage from the 19th century? He had the big pole that went through his head and he survived.
Yeah, there we
but
go.
It completely changed his personality.
Right.
Yeah.
No fear and says everything and cusses
Right.
and is gruff and
Right.
there's been cases about where a female was ovulating and in that state of hormonal imbalance, the attorney was able to get them off. So
Sure.
to your point, the majority of those are incarcerated between 15 and 25. That's a pivotal period of a life where there's
Right.
hormonal imbalances,
Right.
where you're having these changes, and now you could carry this weight on your shoulders for the rest of your life because of a simple mistake.
Exactly.
As an offspring, my dad was a former pilot, and there's something called the poor judgment chain. And I
Okay.
went off the rails. I did stupid things all the time. And he said, Sean, you make one bad decision, it's going to become another and another and another. We need to set you back on the tracks and stop being on the poor judgment chain. So I think Turning
That's really
Leaf
good. Yeah.
is helping to reframe the awareness for people to be making better decisions to live a better life.
Absolutely, and through
Yeah.
the cultural context that they're already familiar with, because it's within their social structure. I mean,
Yeah.
we can give people help, but really, people are complicated,
Yeah.
and you got to really know people for years to really have a chance to to transform them. But they are capable of transformation. We are capable of that.
Mhm.
We've got these psychological points where a lot of times either where you become a genius or where you become mentally unstable, it's the same opportunity and the context. You either go transform into one way or another. And I've seen that with people. So if you give the right context, then you'll get more of the transformations towards the positive way and fewer towards that depressive, suicidal, difficult way. It's all about
Or
managing
even
those
to your point, where you're a genius
transformations.
or otherwise. That's a matter of perspective and finding the talents for an individual and extracting those innate strengths that a person has, which this person could be a genius in some emotional capacity or some other capacity that is not measured by intellect. And I think part of your program may be able to help them to find their specialized strengths to have the best possible outcome for the greatest potential.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and there's a lot of times all we need to be able to feel better is to give to others. It's that giving that really makes us feel well, which is really the community scale dynamics. Which we need to have things that the families and the defendants are doing together where they're also giving back.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to be able to develop. That's how you develop.
Or more succinctly, the Beatles, all you need is love.
Oh yeah, that's
Have
it.
an attitude of gratitude, pay it forward. I mean, it's all
All
yeah,
that stuff
yeah.
sounds trite, but it's so true in its effect. That really is the dynamic, and that's what the government can't do. The government is incapable of having emotions. It's a fictional entity. The state only exists in our communal imaginations, right? The people you're actually with, that you breathe the same air with, the communities, are the ones where your real solutions are.
Those that you can relate to and you understand, and they understand you. And well, what else can we talk about this fun?
There are a few other things I made
Cool.
notes on, but if I may, what's our time? Can I get it? Okay. Good. So one of the things that I've noticed in recent changes for bail is that they've reduced a lot of charges that used to be felonies into misdemeanors, and that really changes the nature of the relationship of the arrest and who you get in, and that revolving door, because police don't have the same level of control when they find someone's maybe committing a misdemeanor. They have to see it. If you have a rumor, you have probable cause that they're committing a felony, you can go in and investigate and make the arrest. But there have been a lot of the arrests that would be made in California, because generally there's about 1 to 1.5 million arrests a year in California. It's been decreasing since about 2013, but now more of them are being misdemeanors because more of those crimes, are being charged as misdemeanors.
Assuming that they're even charged. I mean,
Right.
with petty theft, you can get $900 and potentially be cited out or released on your own recognizance. And that's
Right.
why certain cities like San Francisco with Walmart having their security raised by 16 times
Right.
and then deciding to leave, Target deciding to leave San Francisco, especially with the LA Railways, with I think it's called United Pacific.
Right.
And they're having their own problems with thefts. Yeah, so not only are the charges becoming lesser charges, but even the lesser charges are becoming what would it be? Nothing basically, or a promise, and then now we have increasing crime.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. With that dynamic, but there's just an underlying lack of respect that is being fomented by that. And one of the ways that bail can really help with that is when you have somebody who's been arrested and they're on bail and they commit a new crime, they're either going to be surrendered back to custody, or there's going to be a comeuppance over that continuing crime. Whenever you're on government pretrial, there's none. In San Francisco, I saw last year, 74% of the violent releases had committed another crime before the trial. 55% overall. I mean, the recidivism rates are crazy, and that's directly related, I think, to what you were saying about not having the social structure that bail gives you. That's what's caused the crime rates to really spike, is because even people who are getting multiple misdemeanors over and over again, they're having no consequences, none.
And not only as you're saying this, I was thinking through like, okay, so you have the government that's going to arrest you. You have the government that's going to go to court against you. And now
Right.
you're going to have the government that's going to be your pretrial release.
Right.
So, and then if you have a public defender, that's the government. Like, is there anybody on your side? I mean, unless you get a private attorney.
Right.
I mean, bail agents are not going to give you legal advice, but they can help in a lot of other ways to help you to be able to get to court, to make more informed decisions, to be able to get through it. And I hate to think that with pretrial release or algorithms that you're going to have the government on so many sides of you and expect to get a truly fair shake.
Well, that's a good point. And public defenders are really limited in their ability to do anything politically, because they're employees of the counties. And most counties will not allow public defenders to make public, political statements, as a part of it. And so the experience of those defendants really only gets to be, bail agents have a unique window on that, because the public defenders aren't allowed to talk about it, and the DAs are just prosecuting. It's really their job to come up with the worst story that they can tell about you on the facts that they have, and that's generally how they get you to agree to a deal.
I mean, currently we've got defendants that have been out for multiple years. I think the longest right now is 5 years.
Wow.
Do you think that someone that's a pretrial manager that wants to close a case is going to let that thing go on and on and on and on? And
That's a fair point.
There's going to be other incentives for them to get that case moved, to work with the public defender, to potentially plea bargain a deal, and it may not be in the best interest of the defendant. You work with your bail agent. The bail agent leaves the bond out for the case. I mean, it's
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things they got in the new laws is you can't charge annual premiums anymore. You get, no matter how long it lasts, you only get the one.
right.
You know, so-
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, because that that can add up.
No
Yeah,
doubt,
right.
no doubt, and some bail agents went back and forth, but that was,
Right.
I think, the last law they passed in Sacramento. Um, uh,
And to that point, yeah, I think that a lot of things with the government aren't done right, but they do some things right. And I'm not pro-government, I'm not anti-government, but I think you and I are more neutral with bail law, bail matters. So yeah, we're rah, 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 sis, kumbah bail, but we're still more neutral than the average person to be able to try and give the listener or clients more of an informed decision so they can make their own decisions. And that's one of the reasons that I wrote
right.
Get Bail, Leave Jail. Yeah, it's on Amazon. And this, if you're incarcerated or your loved one and you don't know who to call or what to say, just go download my book. I think it's like $10. You might save yourself thousands of dollars, and it's digital, and you'll make an informed decision.
Yeah,
Mm.
but people have so little idea of the structure of bail and what it's actually doing. If you can read something comprehensive like that, I did the foreword.
Thank
It
you
is
so
really
much,
helpful.
John. John
Yes, of
Rorba.
course.
He wrote a very good foreword.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. But I agree. I really like that as a tool because often the indemnitors have very little experience with the criminal justice system. You've been called to stand for somebody that you have a social relationship with, but you're not the one that's committed a crime. So you often may not know any of the dynamics of it, and a good overview and a flow like this, and the simple, clear language that it's in, it's very helpful. I agree.
And I'm not saying buy the book. I'd make more money if you didn't buy the book. But there's something called a DA reject. And if
Yeah.
you decide to let your loved one maybe stay in jail for a day or 2 days, they may choose not to prosecute. Then you don't waste the money on bail. So spend 10 or 20 bucks for my book. You might save thousands.
That is always the decision to make, and that is
Yeah.
just such a tricky decision. I've had family members arrested for bogus reasons, and they have high bails, and they were offended by the thought of somebody investing that much money and just letting them out of custody.
Right.
It's like, I'll just sleep.
Yeah.
It wasn't a problem. Others, are just in mortified terror, of being in jail, and in those circumstances, and their families, and they often will make commitments early in that bail process to get someone out of jail that they struggle to keep later on. How do you deal with that?
Well, I would say if you speak to your loved one, have them sleep away from the toilet and try and get a toilet paper roll as a good pillow so it's more comfortable and you sleep. It's going to be cold. Try not to be on the concrete, but if so, you'll get through it. I mean, but yeah, some families want that. Like, I know I've been in jail before, and I said, I'm not going to call my dad and say, Dad, I'm in jail. I'm just going to wait and I'm going to work it through.
Right.
But at other times, you don't know what's going on, and you don't know if they're going to get shivved, or if you don't know if there's going to be some racial ganging up on somebody. So I get it. If it's a police department that's a smaller holding facility, there's less potential than if they go to a county jail. Once a
Right.
person's in a county jail, Orange County, LA County, Riverside, it is a bigger general population, and there is greater risk. And if you waited for them to be shipped from that local holding facility at the police department or a local sheriff's department, the time for them to be released is far greater typically. So if you're going to wait,
Yeah.
you want to get your loved one out before they get shipped to county. But maybe after they go to court and maybe they get a DA reject. So, yeah.
Every number that I have seen from all of the litigation they've had on bail throughout the country has shown that commercial bail gets people out of jail fastest. You spend less time in jail with commercial bail than others. And also, you get a better deal as a racial minority from bail agents than you do from the government. In particular, there's bail agents are widely varied in their ethnicities because people tend to
And their
trust
gender.
people and
I
their
mean,
genders.
my
Of
my
course.
mother, my stepmother is she ended up being one of the first proud female-owned bail agencies, and American Express had given her some honorarium for it. So
Uh-huh.
it's cool that it's not just black or white, brown and yellow, red, any color we are. It's female. I think there's a transgender bail agent. And so
Sure.
there are progressive people, and there are unique considerations given.
Well, even
Yeah,
language. I mean, language is
right.
very important, and there's a lot of immigrants, and they come from a lot of different places. So people generally want to be able to communicate at those times of crisis. You have an easier time communicating with people whose cultural background you understand.
No, I'll tell you point blank that there's we have a number of calls that come from Irvine where there's um, people that are arrested on UCI campus, and I have to try. 我会说普通话. I speak a little bit of Mandarin
Oh,
to
excellent.
try and relate, but I end up calling my buddy George, who's Taiwanese. And I'm like, George, I got another bond, and I need you to help because they don't know the language too well, and they're trying to navigate the system. Can I help you
Right.
out? Well, I'll buy you drinks. I'll buy you a steak. Just relate to the person, ask the questions, and in the process, he's like, "Whoa, this is kind of cool because you're helping people out. You're starting to understand it more." And I'm like, "Yeah, George. I mean, come work with me." He's like, "Nah, man, I got a great job, but give me a call. I'd love to have a steak or some drinks." But it's about connecting, relating, and listening. Yeah.
Absolutely, right. And being someone that can be listened to help those, those communications as it goes through. Thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast, Bailed Out with John Roraba and Sean Plotkin. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and God bless.
And feel free to check out Get Bail, Leave Jail on Amazon. Or if you do have a bail question or have any bail needs that need to be addressed, you can contact me at sean@angelsbailbonds.com. Or if you have a loved one in custody and you're not sure where they are and you have questions, but you don't want to talk to anybody, you can check out our website at searchinmate.com. Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
This is the Bailed Out Podcast,
You have rights.
Nobody knows how to deal with the bureaucracy.
where we talk bail to keep you out of jail.
The only thing that saved me each time is I wasn't drunk.
Does that mean you're a really bad driver then?
Hosted by Sean Plotkin, a multi-generational bail agent and 5-star author. And John Rorobar, a non-profit founder and attorney who has helped over 20,000 families.
We're not far right, we're not far left, we're very neutral, I hope.
Bail is the balance.
John, what is justice?
That is what the court system is there to establish.
Bailed Out is brought to you in part by searchandmate.com, Turning Leaf, and Angels Bail Bonds. Now, please welcome your hosts, Sean and John.
Won't do any good. I just this is the core of me that really pushes through these kinds of things. But I recognize the value. I know that it's good, and this is going to be one of these episodes where we get to talk about current events and our experience, and what California has been continuing doing, So with the legislature, we've got 2 bills again affecting bail that are directly related to us and our experience. So talking about that'll be good.
Let's start. All right. I'd like to introduce John Rorobar, foremost bail expert attorney in the United States. Some would argue otherwise. They're wrong.
I don't know that anyone would argue.
No. Then they're not good enough to argue.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's what I've focused my whole career on. I had the good luck of going to law school with a bail agent and started working with his dad's attorneys in the early '90s, and that's all I've done. So I hope I've done it well. I feel like I've made a contribution as an attorney, which is not always an easy thing to do as an attorney.
Definitely not.
So
And who am I?
who are you? This is Sean Plotkin. Yes,
Oh.
yes. So it's so nice to have you with me, Sean, and I really appreciate your real world experience and being able to understand how bail affects so many parts of our society and the importance of it right now when we're having so much change in the world. Bail is really a stabilizing.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, but we are being the change in the world. I mean, hence with you with Turning Leaf, who's helping to sponsor this event, Angels Bail Bonds, and of course, searchandmate.com. So thank you for the sponsoring. Why don't we dive right into the current events, since that's what we're here about.
So one of the 2 bills I want to talk about today is a bill that we've been trying to get for a long time, which is to have some regulation of the fugitive recovery, otherwise known as bounty hunters, with the state. And we finally got in the Department of Insurance to agree.
What's it called? Is it called the bounty hunter bill, or the fugitive recovery?
I think it's
or the bail enforcement agent bill, or the Boba Fett bill, or
they named it bail bonds, but it's essentially the regulations of and some really common sense regulations of who gets to do the fugitive recovery work. With bail, one of the real differences with bail or most government pretrial is if the defendant fails to appear, there is a penalty that has to be paid. And to avoid that penalty, the bail agents and the family, they hire their professional fugitive recovery people to go out and to bring the person back so that we can have a trial, so that we can see if there is justice at all.
So let's let them catch up, because you're using a lot of advanced words that are more nuanced. So a person does a bail bond.
Yes.
And they sign a contract to guarantee that they're going to make all of their court appearances.
Yes.
And if they don't make all of their court appearances, then there can be a warrant filed for their arrest. And once that warrant is issued, then they become a fugitive. Yes. And they have a period of time to go back to court or be brought back to court. Usually they bring themselves back to court, but sometimes it happens that they need to be brought back to court. And then the fugitive status is removed, and the bail is to stand, assuming the bail agency is willing to reassume the liability of a bail bond. At that point, the bail agency needs to turn in a paperwork called a reassumption, and that's usually where the defendant and the bail agent are like, okay, you didn't go to court. Oh, well, I slept in. Well, why did you sleep in? Well, my cat died. Okay, that makes sense. Or I got stoned. All right, well, We need you to come into our office and explain your judgment that led you to that point. And how do we prevent you from having poor judgment again? Because not only are you on the line, we're on the line, and we guarantee to the judge that you're going to go to court. All right.
That's exactly right. And that is how bail works and why bail is so much better. If you contrast that to government pretrial, the same person fails to appear.
Well, that's a great thing, but let's focus on the bounty hunter first.
Exactly.
The second point is the pretrial, right?
Well, I understand, but the reason that we need the bounty hunter, the fugitive recovery regulations is because when you have bail going out and bringing the people back as opposed to law enforcement and opposed to the pretrial, it's much safer because you're able to deal with the family, and the fugitive recovery agent doesn't have the same duties or the same overhead that a police officer would. So in that same scenario that you just gave, the way that a bail agent would handle that, call the person, come in, talk to them, try and resolve it, get them back into going to court again, reassume the liability of the bond, stand up for them again, that actually solves the problem. That gets the person going to court. So many of the pretrial systems are more concerned about retrieving the ankle monitor that's been cut off rather than to bring the person back. And the only way the person gets back into the system is when they're caught for the next crime. How many crimes have they committed before they're caught? Because nobody's having that conversation that the bail agents have because they don't have the incentives. So I'm happy that I've got a bill coming out of California that I can support again. I'm really proud of all the work that I helped do in the 90s and the early 2000s to set up this system that produces 999 of the people that bail agents have let out on bail out of every 1,000 back to court. They either never fail to appear, or those conversations you have with them, you get them back into court.
So
Having that licensed again will help keep everyone safer. So I'm glad that California and the Department of Insurance are finally doing that.
Well, can we clarify what specifically it is? Because I think some of the work you're mentioning from the 90s and 2000s is requiring people to have of some kind of a license, not have certain felonies, to be able to apprehend fugitives. But what is more that is being done in this bill that hasn't been done before that's taking it a step further?
Yeah, the bill is actually very simple. It just has some very simple licensing requirements, which are really but the difference is that you now have a state agency, the Department of Insurance, who will monitor to make sure that the fugitive recovery agents actually meet those qualifications. And because bounty hunting is an exciting job that a lot of people want to get into,
Right.
and they may have had a felony. They may not be safe. They may not be a person who you really want to do that. So having some regulation for that is I think it's important. And that's not been there because really no regulatory agency has wanted to take on the burden of supervising those who are picking up the fugitive recovery. But the police go out and do fugitive recovery. It's one of the most dangerous things they do. And it's dangerous to the family. It's dangerous to society. Bounty hunters have many better tools to make that a much safer process, and a lot of it is just what you described with the conversations that you have.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to argue your point. I don't think that being a bounty hunter is really that exciting. If you're a good bounty hunter, it's very boring because you're very patient and you mitigate the risks before they escalate, or you anticipate, or you read the people. Not just the defendant, because you're not usually dealing with the defendant, but you're dealing with the loved one. And you're knowing that they want to make sure that their loved one's protected. But if you're able to infer the nonverbal cues of how they communicate or what they say or when they're lying, then you can anticipate the problems before they occur, and you can control the scenario as much as you'd like to. A difference between a bounty hunter and a police officer or somebody that's put into it is they're not spending their whole focus on that person, and they don't have the amount of time that a bounty hunter would be able to put in. And that bounty hunter is going to put in their time because they're not going to get paid if they don't perform. Whereas a police officer is like, all right, I have a certain amount of quota. I have to do a certain amount of work. I have to adhere to a certain standard and policy. I may have had to deal with this call, which has put me in this different mode of thought.
They have to preserve evidence.
Yes.
They have to not ask the wrong questions. Right? There's a lot involved in in any law enforcement interaction, and our police, for good reasons, are trained to protect themselves. They're trained to go out in those circumstances and to protect themselves. And sometimes to protect themselves, it becomes a more aggressive situation that the bail agents, because they're the bounty hunters and the fugitive recovery, they just have better tools to be able to minimize that. But I agree with you. Bounty hunting and fugitive recovery is not an exciting thing to do, but many people don't know that, and they think it is. All the Mandalorian and so forth.
No, I remember a story. I mean, I'm able to be a bounty hunter now. Many of the older bail agents that have had their licenses don't have to go through and get licensed as a bounty hunter. But I remember we were putting out a interview for people to come in and be bounty hunters.
Yeah.
And one of the first guy had a glaring resume, but he had a something where you carry a gun here, and he opened up the back of his car, and he had 3 guns, and he had a gun on him, and he came in. And right off the bat, I said, "Thank you, but we're not interested. Go away." And he's like, "What the?" And anybody that wants to brandish a weapon or be able to show who they are is not a true bounty hunter, no matter how good their resume is, because it's not about power.
Yeah,
you don't apprehend people out of power.
Right.
You build trust. You build relationships. You build rapport. You try and work with the person to get them out. You don't try and trick them or manhandle them. So. If you're a former military, and we get a lot of former military or bounty hunters, and they're great, but if you're looking for action, this is the wrong profession.
That's so true. I'm glad you said it so strongly, because it does happen. That fugitive recovery, you're out in dangerous circumstances, but you have to do everything ahead of time to avoid that. And that does often make it boring.
Yeah,
but it is much safer than any of the interactions you have with the police or the government pretrial.
All right, so getting on to the government pretrial, let's wrap that up on the bill. And so I'm excited with it. We didn't even talk about why it's better, but clearly, I guess all of that was why it's better. Why don't you lead into why we don't like the guilty before innocent bill?
Yeah, I mean that name for the
bill.
Yeah, the guilty before innocent. So, government pretrial is a very different process than bail, and their ability to try and duplicate that has been disastrous. So, one of the things that
does everybody know pretrial? We've already discussed this before. Should we explain what it is?
So the government, in certain circumstances in California, they've developed a system where government workers will gather information about the defendant, prepare a report for the court, and then use that report in in a whole bunch of circumstances to define bail.
So wait, you gave me a thought. Let's say you're the government worker.
Right.
Ask me a question.
Where do you live?
I thought I had a Fifth Amendment. I'm innocent until proven guilty. I'd like to speak with my attorney. Now
but
what?
It says right here, we're not going to share any of that information unless it lets you be unless it has your guilt. It's going to be confidential unless we have all of the excuses that they then write later in the bill.
So can my attorney be present during a pretrial? Or what if I can't afford an attorney?
Right.
Can I have a public defender help me against pretrial?
Right.
I don't know. I'm asking.
No. I mean, no.
So wait, I can't have the state protect me against the state.
Exactly. And that's what this bill is trying to do in a typically bureaucratic California style, is to set up the who gets access to that information once you've given it to the state. And the truth is, anyone can get access at a certain point. It's just all one bureaucracy that shares that.
Well, don't we have a number of, besides the Fifth Amendment, aren't you saying the 13th Amendment?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why don't you explain the 13th Amendment?
So the 13th Amendment is the limitation on slavery unless you're convicted of a crime. If you look at the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, it's all about, it's a great movie because it really shows the passion of why Lincoln really needed to get the 13th Amendment passed, but it also is limited. It didn't eliminate slavery like most people think. It just, you have to be convicted of a crime. So there's been a problem ever since then of the states sometimes overtly, selling the labor of the inmates, and sometimes just using their power to restrict the liberty and the social connection.
So this isn't the guilty before innocent. This is the enslave and get you to use information against yourself before you're innocent, Bill.
Exactly, because
Huh.
I mean, practically, that's exactly what it does.
Who's supporting this, and why would this junk pass?
You know, the people who are supporting it are the people who want to hire more government pretrial workers because it's a bureaucratic job. You know, that's really, it's the unions that have really been pushing SB 10.
Mhm.
And even though the voters voted SB 10 out, which was the bill that got rid of bail and changed it to pretrial, they've still funded and implemented the pretrial bill, and now they're trying to lock it in and expand the power.
So wait. So the people of the state of California voted to keep bail,
Yes.
but the ones that were against it still pushed through laws or some way to adhere to something, and then they're making that something bigger, even though everybody voted against it.
Absolutely, you know, and
Or the
by
majority,
5
at
million,
least.
yeah, it was a huge, it was like a
Yeah.
5 million vote margin. Absolutely, and it's working terribly. You know, government pretrial is it just has very high recidivism rates, and it has very high failure to appear rates, and it has no resources bringing the people back to court and doing nothing to actually help the families. In
And
fact,
so
it makes it
recidivism is when you get
confrontational.
out of jail
Oh,
and you
sorry,
end up
yeah.
going back to jail before you're tried for the first time you were arrested, and then most likely released again, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen all the stories around the whole country now with the anti-bail bills that have just had a revolving door. You know, where people are getting arrested dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and just going out and continuing to commit the crimes.
I guess if I was going to use data, and I'd say, yeah, we pre-trialed somebody out, and they didn't forfeit. Well, if they got rearrested, then they did forfeit, but they were back in custody, so that doesn't count as a forfeiture. So that could be a way to distort the data to look artificially lower than it is, even though I know I'm more scared now than I was 10 years ago, and I'm reading in the news about crime being up and murders and this and that. So obviously something's happening, unless the matrix is, I don't know, COVID, matrix, we're all locked down. Like, I figured like we'd stay in our homes, but I don't know.
Are we in an alternate timeline? I was asking that the other day. I mean,
Well, I tend to think so. If we're following laws that didn't pass,
right.
like, what is that called?
Right. And in New York, at least, they're trying to get rid of or trying to limit the anti-bail laws. In California, they're just doubling down and giving, you know, trying to make it even more. But it doesn't work, because that no matter what report you give to a judge, or no matter what information is in that report when they're setting the bail, some people are still going to fail to appear, and some people are still, you're still going to have, no matter what their past was,
Right.
it doesn't tell what their future is. You know, some of the hardest cases bail agents have is you bail someone out for fairly routine crime, and then they commit another crime, and they're running from that. I mean, that does happen occasionally. You can't stop that from happening. But with bail, you minimize the negative consequences for that, and you get the best balance for the criminal justice system.
Yeah, no, like I had mentioned before in a previous podcast, how a mother wanted to bail out her kid for like the 7th or 8th time, and I'm like, heck no.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not going to let you pay me to bail him out.
Right.
She got mad at me, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're only, I forget what you're, helicopter parent, or you're helping to promote bad behavior.
Yeah, it's
Let's
an
sit down
enabler.
and have a coffee and talk it through. And
Right.
her daughter was there, and she's trying to explain for him, but understanding with me, and it's like,
Well, and that's
Yeah.
why Turning Leaf is building the coalition with the nonprofits, the rehabilitation, the you know, those community organizations with bail, to be able to give people help when they need it. You know, it's a very simple system. Turning Leaf actually doesn't do much more than the turn. You know, once you have an indemnitor on a bail bond, we do just do a safety check, make sure everyone's okay, everyone has a place to be.
and an indemnitor is someone that guarantees the defendant's appearance in court.
Right.
Often the defendant can be the indemnitor,
And
or
then-
the indemnitor could be a friend, a family member, a
Yeah.
loved one, anybody that is recognized as being stable in the community. And it doesn't have to be having money, doesn't have to be having great credit. It
Yeah.
could be social fabric, as you like to say, where somebody like, let's say a reverend, this person, you're not going to not go to court if the reverend sides for you, because the whole community is going to shun you or your family is going to be ashamed. And that weighs so much more than the amount of the collateral.
You can't hide from your social network. And so if you have a socially significant person that has a liability that they have to pay for you, that socially significant
I don't know.
person,
I mean, isn't Zuckerberg trying to get away from that to the metaverse because of other stuff? But that's something else.
I don't. Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about the metaverse next podcast. Yeah. So the process, the decision-making process that they're trying to implement with government pretrial simply does not function. It doesn't have the right
well, now, like you had
incentives.
mentioned, had we talked about before, the Arnold tool, which is an algorithm that's owned by a former Enron executive. Like whenever I hear Enron and I think, hey, there was a lot of stuff that went on, and I'm thinking, okay, Arnold tool, Enron, like, let's put two and two together. Maybe there is a problem here. Maybe not. I don't know. But
Well, I'd like to see how much money California spent on that compared to what it would cost to just subsidize bail for everyone who qualifies for the public defender. They could probably have just paid for everybody's bail for what they have given the guy. You remember what Arnold was most famous for is Enron. I mean, he stole our so much money from our electrical system. Gaming those the electrical.
And even to your point, how much money is spent to be keeping people in jail, to have to pay for their laundry and their food and make sure that they're mentally sound. I mean, we're upwards, I think it's between 38 to 50,000 a year for an inmate, and 80, 85, 90% of them aren't even in there for violent crimes. Why don't we just use that money to help make sure they go to court and have them out with their families so they don't have an opportunity cost of not being able to work, not being able to take their kid to school, having that social interaction with the family that's being lost because they're in jail.
Right.
I mean, to your point, why spend it on pretrial, which is government pensions and inflated costs, where we're having our California is not even able to pay its bills.
Well, to get information that really doesn't help you solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because, the most of the information that they're trying to gather in these investigative reports that they're trying to expand, in my opinion, is useless to determine whether the defendant will come to court or not. And it's just an excuse to be able to increase the conditions that they have. The other problem with government pretrial, even if they don't hold you in custody, they often make you waive your Fourth Amendment rights. I had a published opinion.
Can you explain what the Fourth Amendment rights are?
Yeah, Fourth Amendment is your right to privacy, for the government not to search you without a warrant. Almost all of the people who are released on government pretrial are required to waive those Fourth Amendment rights. And they often, on bail, they're making them do that as well, especially if it's both.
For example, it goes back to that ankle monitor. Imagine you're in bed with your chick, your kids are asleep, you've been waiting for a month to be able to have an intimate moment, and boom, you scratch you with the ankle monitor. Well, there goes that privacy. Or if you want to be in a shower and you want to just relax and get that, but now you got to have your leg outside of the shower. You are. That is a form of slavery. That's not different than almost a ball and chain having a leg out, leg in.
Yeah, or home arrest. A lot of these dynamics, and when you've got a system that performs as well as California bail does, the laws I was referring to in the 80s and 90s that I helped with were laws like the extensions of time, so we can get another 6 months if we've been looking for a defendant. Penal Code 1305G, if you go anywhere in the world and you find the defendant and have him identified by law enforcement, and the DA doesn't want to extradite, then you can get an exoneration. If they do want to extradite, the bail pays for the cost of the extradition and we bring them back.
So what are some elements in pretrial that they're trying to push through now that they don't have from before?
Well, look, in my experience, most judges like bail because the judges that are, especially for arraignment, they see that people show up when they're on bail, and government pretrial, they don't. So what I've seen, as far as I can tell, is the judges are looking at these investigative reports they're giving them now, and they're rejecting their findings. The judges often don't follow what the pretrial recommends because, the judges have their own experience.
But to that point, why is the Judicial Council still permitting pretrial?
Yeah, look, why they're still doing that is I think just a matter of control. I think the government likes to control the criminal justice system as much as they can, and it's difficult for a lot of the people in the government to understand the neutral bail agent position. And there's a lot of territorial battles between the state and bail agents because their duties overlap and their techniques are so different. So I do think that there are some in the mostly in the Democratic establishment, but also that they just think that the government should do the job rather than private entities.
But I mean, more specifically to this bill, what in addition do you think that they're trying to add that isn't being implemented currently?
Well, they're just trying to get more information into those reports and then to be able to have those reports, the flow of those reports that they go around. And
do you know what kind of information in addition they're looking for? Like more information about loved ones or occupational status or marital status or sexual history, preference of dog, cat? I mean, what kind of information is it that they would be wanting to push? And how could it not be relevant to anything?
Well, one of the real problems with all of those is that, the criminal justice system has been recognized to have.
I guess it goes in line with your Fourth Amendment right to privacy. Right. No matter what they ask, it doesn't matter. It's none of your fucking business.
Well, that's true. That there you go. That's a good point, because not only does it matter, but it actually, because they can't make the right decisions, they don't have the right incentives to make the right decisions on who to let out and who not to let out. Right. They really can't say no. They're just. I find the
whole. So it's just a reach of greater power. Okay.
Exactly. It didn't work, and so they want more power. That's just what I hear from the
who's supporting this bill?
It was.
I know you said the unions, but which politician can we write and say thank you so much for trying to take our privacy?
Yeah, it is.
And reinforce further slavery.
Cholera is the
cholera.
Cholera. It's not cholera. Cholera. KALRA.
Okay, so call up Congressman Cholera and let him know you want your privacy and you don't really like slavery.
And getting this additional information is not going to make their decisions any better. It's not going to make us any safer, but it is going to be. It's going to give the government information that they don't deserve outside of the process that we have set up.
Is there any information that the government deserves, you think? Or is that a fine line? And that's all.
Well, they've got to prosecute a crime, right? So they're obviously they have the investigators and they have to think.
Right, but is that pretrial's role? I thought that you're. So now that goes back to innocent until proven guilty. But oh wait, we need to prosecute a crime. We're going to ask you a few questions, but you don't have to answer. But you do have to answer as a condition of the release. Oh wait, so am I innocent until proven guilty, or are you going to put me on an interrogation stand and I got to be able to tell you something? Whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but something to be able to stay out as a condition of my release. Well, and so is that even fair?
Yeah, of course not. And think of the context. You've just been arrested, and now you have to get out. And to get out, you have to try and please this person.
Yeah.
And you got to talk. And do you think they're going to not ask you the questions? Right?
I'm sure they're going to ask.
And so a lot of the information they're trying to get is also information like of your past interactions with the criminal justice system, your family's past interactions, and we know a lot of that's racist.
And to that point, I mean, we got to wrap it up. But I mean, I get a lot of customers that ask me. They give me their story. They ask me, and I'm like, I'm your bondsman. I'm not going to give you legal advice. You need an attorney. Contact an attorney. I personally, I don't know what I would do, but I'm not going to get into it because that's your business, not mine.
Right.
All right. So, what did we learn today? I mean, what was the fun points?
Yeah, Sean. I really liked just your discussing that bail process and what happens when somebody fails to appear and how you get them back into court and the power of persuasion that you use because of the incentives. I really enjoyed hearing you talk about that.
Thank you so much for that, man. I enjoyed hearing how you think about any way possible to be able to help families out from having to pay the state for something that, I don't know, it probably shouldn't have even happened in the first place, but if it did, you're there, you got their back. So with that, some of the key points, due process. Reach out to Congressman Cholera. You don't want your privacy invaded. You don't want to bring back slavery. And what was the thing about the bounty hunter? That we want the bounty hunter bill to
the Department
pass
of Insurance
because you'll be safer.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll be safer because you don't have to worry that someone else is going to get involved. You're going to have licensed people to make sure that they're doing their job and they're incentivized to do the job right. And the majority of the bounty hunters don't seek action. They seek resolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All the bounty hunters I work with, their first priority is safety, and they have the time and the ability to actually safely bring somebody in. It is orders of magnitude safer than sending the police fugitive recovery units.
Would you like to close us out?
Thank you. Yes. I will do my best. We got to. I don't.
So
now I
John
have to think
is
about
founder of
the
Turning Leaf, which helps
structures.
out families of defendants to bring them back, to make it easier for them, to help them through it.
I'm trying to build a coalition with the nonprofits that are already helping defendants with bail to give those nonprofits the opportunity to help the families when they really need it. And I think that's how we if you have strong communities, you have a strong society and healthy individuals.
Great. And I'm Sean Plotkin, the owner of Angels Bail Bonds, formerly Plotkin Bail Bonds, a multi-generational bail bond business, and the author of this book, Get Bail, Leave Jail. If you listen to everything we said or you listen to nothing, but you want informed decision-making, you want to be able to get this book, reach out to me at sean@searchinmate.com, one of our sponsors. I'm also the owner of searchinmate.com, where you have a loved one who you haven't seen in a while. You could do a nationwide warrant check, and we'll help you find them.
And thank you so much, Sean. And
Thank you,
just
John.
my final thought, we all need to listen to each other.
Absolutely.
And I'd like you to listen wherever you find your podcasts. What
Yeah,
is
I
our
think
phrase?
it's rate, review, or subscribe to your favorite mode of listening to our podcast.
Excellent, Sean. Thank you.
Good find.